Welcome back to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, Dramatis Personae on It's All Been Checked Before. Let me Dramatis Persona on here. Get all of it. You know, you just hear it, but you can see more of it and hear more of it. Become a Patreon member. Patreon member? I still said Patreon. You say tomato, I say tomato. You can hear me say both. Become a Patreon member. It does not take much. Actually, you can hear all of us say both. It does not take much. It's less than a cup of coffee a day. Actually, it's probably a cup of coffee a month. 1 cup of coffee a month. You can become a Patreon member, get all the bonus stuff. Not just us, but the mothership and all kinds of other stuff. Patreon.com/IABD. And I didn't want to get this way about it, but I did get a little dramatic. And this is Dramatis Persona on It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome! We are here for Dramatis Personae. I would ask for your first impressions, but I'm probably going to cue you both and murder you. So I guess it doesn't matter. Now, what are your first impressions?
Well, I mean, it is very important to choose which side you're going to take on this.
Yeah.
First, I mean, there are other factors.
What are the two sides here? Because there's three of us.
Well, I guess it would be you and Steven then, wouldn't it? Usually.
Steven and I versus you?
Yeah. No, I'm deciding which side to join.
My challenge, my loyalty to Jimmy-Jerome is unchallenged, except for my loyalty to Keith.
I mean, I don't think it would be very good for the podcast for any of us to pick sides.
I suppose.
How about the three of us versus another podcast?
There we go.
So, what do you think of this episode? I know last week when we gave the description of the episode, I was very much dreading it, and Keith was very excited. So, let's hear.
Probably then somewhere in the middle, I would say.
Yeah.
that I think those are going to be the opposing sides.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't paying close enough attention exactly what was supposed to happen from the synopsis, because I usually try to block that out anyway. Once things started getting going, I was starting to dread it a bit. Once they started doing that little bit of like, oh, okay, this person's not acting like themselves kind of thing, fine. Once we got to Odo really, Odo and Quark reacting to what they were doing, I think I was being brought back on board. And I think the back half, I was sold again, just the way that everything kind of worked out, especially when Odo figured out how to play along.
Yeah, I thought it was a very naked time, that kind of episode, but I liked that we didn't see the magical beings early on. I know that cuts against my usual where's the mystery? And I was and I even made the note I'm not sure. I'm sure something is powering what's going on, but I don't know what it is yet, and I was okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it, and I think Jimmy, you had kind of hinted towards this. I thought at some point, but not necessarily about this episode, but just generally speaking, I thought the heightened dramatic. I always talk about the Kryptonite episodes of Smallville, and this felt that way. That we got to see that there is this dynamic between Kira and Cisco and everybody, and I thought it made characters like Bashir more interesting, and I like Odo being the guy who was nope, I don't have a brain, I don't have a human brain, so it doesn't work on me. And Quark, for that matter, a humanoid brain, I think that's what he said. But right. So I ended up enjoying it actually, despite it being we've done these episodes before, and sure enough, it ended up being some kind of being
archive or
yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah. But I still ended up enjoying it.
I love it. There were some things. I'm not going to say that there was nothing to like about it, but in general, I thought this was a bad episode. I mean, I think it was probably fun for the actors, and I think you could tell they were enjoying themselves. So that there's some infectious part of oh, these guys are having fun. It's fun to watch people having fun, but in general, the story I found ridiculous. And at this point in the first season of DS9, we've had so many of these standalone emergencies that unfolded in similar manners. I know everyone's been slightly different, but I just am tired of it. I'm ready to move on to something better. And DS9 is going to get there relatively soon. This first season's just not. I think this episode has me back to the point where I was starting at saying this first season's not good. And I think as we took each episode individually on their own, I'm well, it's not maybe as bad as I remembered. But once you pile up a bunch of episodes like this, it's oh yeah, no, this sucks. I'm ready.
Funny. And this may, we talk about this many times, but there was somewhere in the one we watched this week, or maybe it's next week. That's when I really think this. But then I was like, this season isn't that bad. I ended up enjoying this, but
I said this early on in the season. Now I'll have to come back to this. I think that Jimmy, you're just going to be a little bit. I think you're too spoiled by all the things that are going to happen down the road, and I think it's coloring your impression of like the quality of this season. It's not really. I don't think it's. I'm not like, oh my god, I'm miserable or anything. It's just I can see why by comparison.
I mean, you may be right. I think, and I think I was going along okay, and just to drop the fourth wall or whatever again, but. We watched next week's already, right? And so we watched these two back to back, and I think that's what really hammered home for me. This is terrible. Wait till not to blow anything yet, but next week is so good that I was like, oh yeah, this rest of the season has not been good. I'm very much ready to move into that next phase of the show. Like I think next week kind of does.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I mean, to Stephen's point from something he said saying a little earlier, it did. I mean, as standalones go, I think they still managed to, tie it in and enrich the world a bit. Especially when you get to the next episode, they kind of fit together in a way because of the conflict that happens there yet again. I mean, it almost like starts off almost what the central conflict of the episode ends up being for a bit. Kira versus Cisco as far as Bajorn interest in politics.
That's a good point. I didn't try to tie the two together, but that is a running theme.
I think that you have a good point, Jimmy, that the overall stakes weren't big in this episode. I mean, everyone was playing heightened, but the actual stakes weren't that huge. But I still enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah, I think what made it fun for me too was that. I mean, once they started going big, I was on board again. Yeah. It was when there was that sort of middle point where it's kind of like they were kind of just being a little irritating. I started feeling that tedium, like, okay, it's going to be one of these, but especially when Cisco started playing into just that complete tyrant kind of, leaders we have seen since then who don't like to listen to briefings and that kind of dismissive delegation.
I have some more specific thoughts on that later, but yeah. Jimmy, maybe we'll convince you. Maybe Keith and I will convince you.
Maybe. We'll see. At the beginning of the episode, Kira wants to deny a past weapons dealer and allegedly current weapons dealer to the Cardassians passage at the station. And Cisco, of course, says you got to have firm proof. Bring it to me and I'll listen.
How dare he?
As Keith mentioned, there is this. I wish there was more push and pull of the Bajorn versus Federation relations. I was appreciated that this episode did lean into that a little bit because we haven't got as much tension as I feel like there should have been there. They did talk a lot about how when she was looking for a specific element, that element could be used for both energy and weapons depending on how pure it was. And I'm like, okay, like uranium. Okay. It's very clear parallel with
what's Iran
doing these days.
Was it dolomite? Dolomite? Is that what they kept referencing?
It was very close to that. I think it might have been dolomite or something very. I remember thinking the same thing.
Dolomite's a real mineral on Earth, but all I could think of was the blaxploitation film Dolomite and the Eddie Murphy movie. They called me Dolomite about that. So I could never. I was just like, I'm just thinking about movies from the 70s.
Yeah, first thing that popped right in my head too.
In the last couple of years, so.
Okay. They may take the time to mention that Keiko's on Bajor on a field trip. So,
I bumped on that too. Some episodes we'll get into O'Brien. He's like, yeah, man, what kids want to go on a trip to see some processing facility? And I was like, well, you're an engineer on a space station. What do you know about fun? But then I was like, he does play poker. He does have fun there. But I thought it was weird. He's like, who would want to go to that? I'm like, well, I think when you were a kid, were you like, someday I'm going to be the guy who fixes things on a deep space station?
I mean, he may have. Well, remember, what was he before? Yeah, but he was a commissioned officer for a while, right? When he served under the Bob Gutenberg or whatever, and then he became a non-commissioned transporter chief. Right. So, to really kick things off, a Klingon vessel comes through the wormhole, it's destroyed, there's a fun little transporter thing where like the survivor beamed himself out, but like to nowhere specifically. The beam's just hanging into space. Let's grab it and bring that transporter here. What really bothered me about that moment though was Dax told O'Brien what to do on the transporter. And it's like, really? You're gonna tell the best transporter chief of the fleet, who was so good he got promoted to chief engineer, how to do a beam? And O'Brien's good, he takes it graciously, but
maybe they haven't talked about it yet.
Well, and then that's true. Then the Klingon says victory and dies. And I thought the whole episode was going to be about what that meant, which it kind of was. But it turns out victory is a sled. It's just a sled.
All right, sled. Okay, that's not. I thought you were saying something else before.
I think the victory may have been because he outlived his captain, perhaps, and he won.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
So the Klingon was named Hobtil, and he was played by Tom Towles, best known for Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, Night of the Living Dead, the 1990 movie, House of a Thousand Corpses, the 2003 version, and a few other things. He will also appear in an episode of Voyager as a different character.
He was in the Seinfeld episode The Glasses as Tough Guy.
Oh.
Which he looks familiar, but I could not place him in the episode. I looked at a bunch of stuff, but
I don't remember.
I guess I could have brought it up on Netflix. Maybe I will when we're done.
I was going to say he was also famous for a lot of PSAs.
Oh. Oh. Wait,
always bring a towel.
I was going to say, are you talking about Tolly? All right, we got it. I choose both.
You got integrity. So the Klingon ship was apparently on a routine biosurvey mission when they picked something up. I mean, it was very obvious immediately this is where this thing came from.
Right.
It's messing with the crew, right? Like, there was no mystery to this episode.
No.
Well, for us.
Yeah, I guess the crew had a mystery, but yeah.
I enjoyed the way they were so disparaging about a biosurvey. Like, why would you have victory from a biosurvey ship? Bunch of loser Klingons. So I found that amusing.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it did take a second for it to really sink in that something was happening, because when the first thing that we see happen after this death, I think, is Kira stretching procedure and Cisco coming down really harsh on her. And at first I was like, he's overreacting. But then on the other hand, you're like, well, he did just warn her, like, he needs something solid. So that, to me, I wasn't quite there yet. Right. But then we get the scene where Odo basically blackmails Quark into giving him information. And I love that Odo's trying to be subtle, and Quark, of course, doesn't pick up the subtlety. And then Odo has to just, like, resort to threats, which is... I don't think security chiefs usually do. I think that's part of what makes Odo a unique security chief. But then Bashir, it's very odd there. I mean, Odo has, like, morph attack thing, and I guess that was the virus trying to take his body.
Yeah.
But Bashir's not only acting really weird, which he definitely is, and that's your first clue, like, okay, something's going on. But he says he can't do anything to treat Odo, you might as well leave. And I'm like, well, you're a doctor. Shouldn't you be studying him to, like, figure out how you can treat him because he's part of your crew? But then I guess he does say, like, unless you're willing to pour yourself through the scanner. So maybe he has tried to get Odo to let him scan him and get some more information.
That's a good point.
My thought was, well, he got there. How did you make him feel better? But I also thought when he kept saying, I'd love to take you through this, it sounded sinister. Like, you're not coming back out of it.
Although I will say it was very nice that when Odo collapsed, Quark ran for help and actually looked like he was upset about it.
Yeah.
Like when he ran in. So I think that's a nice little hint to their real relationship that's under the surface.
Yep.
Bashir brings up that there's trouble between Kira and Cisco, and then immediately this episode devolves into what it is. That O'Brien and Dax are having their tense scene, and, what side are you going to take? And honestly, it was very arbitrary, I think, that Dax came down on Kira's side. I guess it's the alien messing with them, but if she was truly going to choose, she's known Ben for so long, I feel like she would choose him. Well, it has to be the thing that's pushing one side or the other.
Well, no, there was the whole interplay that played out. I mean, first of all, I think each of them were sort of assigned archetypal roles, for lack of a better term. and this story that was being played out. And so there actually were probably assigned, people from the actual archive to some extent.
Yeah.
But,
to that point, Keith, Dramatis Personae, means the characters of a play, novel, or narrative.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, but also the way that was playing out, she was sort of fawning over Cisco for various times, and kind of this almost like a senilic kind of way, and being pushed to the side. That saying, it took me. I did replay it a couple of times when Kira sat down and asked how she was doing, and it was something like, you put the shoe on the right foot first, but you put the left foot in the bathtub first. I was like, what is it? Oh, okay, I get it. It's just, I'm the left.
I was thinking there was a Babel disease coming back.
It was just I've never heard that expression before, but I took it to mean, of course, that she is feeling undervalued and pushed to the side. Essentially, she's the left foot.
That's fair, because so far in this season, we have had one Dax episode, but it wasn't good. And they really haven't figured out. If you look at which characters they figured out, which ones they haven't. Dax and Bashir are definitely at the top of the list of who they haven't figured out.
Yeah.
Kira, Odo, Quark, they really have figured out, and they've really locked into them. And I'd say Cisco and O'Brien are more towards the middle of, they've got some things about them, but there are other things that are still figuring out. But yeah, Dax has been so sidelined. So to your point there, good. Let's address that so we can fix it and move past it. Please.
But I mean, for the purpose of this, though, I'm just saying that this is you have a tyrannical leader, and this is an example of how they invite betrayal by mismanagement in that sense, by not jury managing as the the current kind of reality TV competition.
Right. Well, and I think the Dramatis Personae moniker on this makes sense in that I think the characters are supposed to be from Mutiny on the Bounty. If you guys are familiar with that.
I know of it, certainly, but
Captain Queen.
I haven't read it, but
it's been done several times, and I think that I don't know if you guys noticed this at the end, near the end, when Cisco's really when they trap him in the docking bay 4 or whatever, his hands are doing this weird. He's doing this weird thing with his hands, and that's so in the Mutiny on the Bounty, Queeg always has these balls or marbles in his hands. He's constantly moving.
Oh wow!
So I think that was an allusion to that, because obviously there's a mutiny going on here. So I think that's these aliens wanted these guys to be the characters in that play. Or
interesting.
Novel, I should say. Or film.
But, that is interesting.
So I think,
So this was written, since we're talking about the story, by Joe Banoski, who was a producer on Next Gen and then Voyager and more recently Discovery and the Orville. He also is a writer, and he wrote for Next Gen Darmok, Hero Worship, Time Zero. So mixed. The most recent episode we've watched that was written by him was Suspicions. It was terrible. So he's not one of our favorites. I mean, Darmok's good, the other ones, but he will write 4 episodes of DS9 in 4 separate seasons while he's producing Voyager. So he's never joins the DS9 staff, but he'll write a few more there. And he has written 1 episode of the Orville and 1 episode of Discovery as well. So.
I have to start adding disclaimers to the beginning of every episode now.
Why?
The opinions of Jerome Wetzel do not necessarily reflect the entire cast. As far
That's
as
true. That's very true.
As their affection for specific writers go, things like that.
That was directed by Cliff Ball, one of our regulars. Just so I don't forget to say it later.
By the way, I was wrong. It wasn't Captain Queeg. Captain Bly was the bounty. I don't know where I got Queeg from, but.
And there's Mr. Someone or other. They always quote. He was like something like, he's like I think it was like Looney Tunes references. I think to that.
That makes sense. Captain Queeg was from the Kane Mutiny, so I get that's a different mutiny, but a mutiny nonetheless. Anyway, sorry.
At this point of the episode, it starts to turn kind of cartoony. I mean, Kira basically asks Odo outright to betray Cisco, which is
awesome.
And that's a pretty bold move, because Odo hasn't chosen a side yet. Is she really that confident? And he doesn't choose a side then. But then we go straight to O'Brien, who says, anyone against Cisco is against me. And you're like, okay, this is just, where is this loyalty come from? Because he has not served with him that long.
Loved it, though.
But no, I think it's to your point, Keith, that they're just acting out the story, so it's not really about O'Brien's relationship with Cisco, but it becomes cartoony in that.
It's heightening. It's very much heightening what the things that could be in their minds, and again, that's why I talk about kryptonite, and the naked time, and all that stuff.
So they talked about only the people in Ops when this Klingon came on board were affected, and when they first played the log. So that's why, like, Quark would have never even had the chance to get infected. But Odo was the one person up in Ops that wasn't, and that's why the whole station isn't involved in the mutiny.
Yeah, I think that probably would have been really annoying.
It would have been.
Yeah.
But you'd think somebody besides Odo would notice that this was happening because op shifts change, people come in and out, and there's got to be another officer who's like just below senior staff that comes on duty and is like, and Kira comes up to him, join me against Cisco, and they're like, what's happening here?
You're probably right, but at the same time, we saw again. It almost did sort of set up the next week's episode in the sense that there probably are other Bajorans she's been talking to about these concerns that were ongoing. And we saw where that sort of to crescendo by the end of this episode. The people who were probably not directly affected, but they report to her and are probably still sympathetic to the cause. But she's probably the one who's being dragged to being more moderate than most of the Bajorans on the station, in fact.
Yes, I think in general, but I also think she'd have to ramp up a lot to go for mutiny from where she was. Like, her and Cisco seem to have a good working relationship. Right. And that would seem out of character if all of a sudden she's mutinying. Also, once the mutiny really gets underway, it's just the senior staff taking part. There were other officers on the bridge. Yeah. What happened to them? Yeah. Why aren't there extras next to both sides?
Right. Well, that's my point. Is you're going to have people who have stronger opinions on both sides, and they would have been dragged in and probably cherry picked for the characters knowing that at some point or another. Yeah. And there have to have been conversations where they're like, Kira, come on, why are you being so soft all of a sudden? Let's do this thing. Let's just put him out of here. Let's do this. She probably had Odo-like conversations with them that went a lot easier.
That's a good point.
And plus, she outranks them and was like, oh, if she says this is okay, then we can finally do what we want.
Cisco, as all this starts to happen, just ends up looking bored, won't do his job, is fine hiding in his quarters and playing with the clock.
Playing? Look at how serious that is. He's so proud.
He's so checked out.
For me, it started that way, but then when I got into the whole mutiny on the bounty parallel, it's like, yeah, he's just gone crazy.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's he makes the clock and he's doing weird hand motions as if there's things in his hand and there aren't.
Was there a clock in either of those plays that or movies or whatever?
I don't remember
anything like some sort of device. Well, you get the marbles, right, or whatever that was.
Didn't Commodore Decker? Didn't he have stuff in his hand in Doomsday Machine? I can't remember. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
It was the controls to the Doomsday Machine, probably.
Dax at one point says Cisco's like a son to her, or a nephew, some beloved family member. I appreciated that reminder that most of her relationship with Cisco has been with her as an old man.
Well, that actually is raises another question again, going back to Stephen for his for the source material. Was there some sort of older figure that was supposed to be like a mentor to the captain in that sense? Maybe some older right-hand man that was being neglected for.
In that one, the idea is that his first mate, there were maybe not a mentor, but there's somebody that was that everyone's behind as to be the leader of the ship.
Right.
Since the other
would that be the Kira in this case then instead?
Yeah.
The reason Joe Minosky had Cisco making a clock, I'm on Memory Alpha, was to try to convey to the audience he'd become an obsessive, quirky Emperor Rudolph type who fussed with mechanical bits and pieces, referring to Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor, King of Hungary and Croatia in the 1570s through 1612, member of the House of Habsburg. Not from one of the fictional stories Stephen's talking about, but they actually modeled him on a historical figure.
Interesting.
Did they mention something about the hand gestures then? Is that part of that as well? Or actually, I'm wondering how they know, like where's that source? Where were they saying that they know that from?
The Deep Space Nine Companion was the source, page 63. It's a book that talks about the show, making of the show. Yeah, I don't see anything here. I was trying to skim through Rudolph II's page, Facebook page, to see if there was something about a coup or a mutiny, and I don't see anything like that on his Facebook page. So I don't know why he chose that. I did see, also interestingly, this is the first Star Trek title in Latin, but there will be 14 other Star Trek titles in Latin.
Oh, wow.
Over the next few years. So
I'm actually kind of disappointed I didn't really follow up on the fact that this famous Pope or Emperor or whoever has a Facebook page that he's been neglecting. He's just...
Oh, also on Memory Alpha, this is funny, I think. This was from the making of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the source, but they said apparently Nana Visitor slipped on a wet stairway and hurt her back while filming this.
Ooh.
And Rick Berman made her go to the hospital even though she wanted to keep filming. And when she got there, the doctors wouldn't even look at her back because they were worried about her terribly broken nose. That can't be a real story. It's on Memory Alpha. Apparently the clock Cisco builds will be seen in the background of many episodes after this. So he keeps the clock. That's nice. Anyway.
It certainly seemed like they were setting that up the way the show ended, or the episode ended.
I enjoyed this interaction between Kira and Cisco. Kira looks at the clock. Did you really build that? Apparently so. Why? I have no idea. It made me laugh very hard. I enjoyed that very much.
I kind of like the way he was marveling at it. And I'm wondering if I would react the same way. I mean, I've had a few incidents, related with alcohol, as some of you might have as well out there, where you do a few things you don't quite remember doing. You're like, it's disconcerting. And I think if I'd done something that elaborate, I would still be a little like, is this going to work? Yeah. Is this going to explode? I don't know, but
I'm very disappointed to see Ira Steven Berg calls this one of his favorite episodes. Especially because he shepherds DS9 through so much. He says it is a third season story that they were bold enough to do in the first season. I disagree with that.
Well, I mean that's a both a good and I think that's correct in both good and bad ways. That this is the sort of thing you would want to do if you have more firmly established characters, to either make that gradation more subtle, from that kind of this is the real character to suddenly they're all wacky, so it wouldn't be so immediately apparent that they're, what I'm saying.
Yeah,
they could have been done with more subtlety or a little bit more whimsy, because they can play with established tropes, established in-jokes and so forth from the show,
Yep.
Just to go back to my Commodore Decker thing, he doesn't actually have marbles in his hands. He has those little early versions of the floppy disks. Floppy disks in his hands that he's holding the whole time.
That's funny.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I was joking. Are you saying like computer disks?
Yeah, he's got the little, like, the things they put in the thing to get ice cream or whatever, or into the captain's chair for programming.
Oh, okay. You mean like within the world of Star Trek? Okay.
Yeah. So in TOS, he's holding on to those the whole time, and he's moving them around, kind of like.
Okay.
Like
you could be right though that maybe every brick's. I mean, I saw nothing in Memory Alpha, but you could very well be right that was an homage. Because that is one of the best episodes of the original series, I think.
Yeah, it feels like it is, and I feel like that is an homage to. And I'm looking for that now too. The Marvels or whatever that. I want to say Captain Queeg, and maybe it is Captain Queeg. So it's a different mutiny. It's the King mutiny, not the mutiny on the Bounty. But the Valerian, when he came on, do you guys remember that? I felt like he was an alien that you would see on lower decks. His voice and everything seemed funny, but I looked at the actor. He wasn't a comedic
in this episode.
Yeah, the makeup was kind of funny, and it had nostrils and places that weren't the normal places, which is cool. I applaud it all, but I was like, I feel like these guys are going to be for comedy, and then that was it. Maybe he was gone.
Speaking of fashion and design and stuff, Quark's neck brace, that was fun.
I bet we never. That was pain. That looked really painful.
It looked like it was just a regular neck brace. They put a bunch of fancy shimmery things on. So neck braces design still to improve in the next 400 years? I find that difficult to believe.
Well, those are the improvements. The what do you got? The flare? Yeah.
He also looked like somebody who was I'm trying to think of the term for fall down Betty or whatever. People that try to drum up money in court cases by pretending, oh, my neck.
Makes
Guys,
sense.
I finally got there thanks to Wikipedia, who I do give money to. Keep them going. In the Star Trek episode The Doomsday Machine, the obsessive Commodore Matt Decker, portrayed by William Wyndham, fusses constantly with 2 futuristic tape cartridges, much as Captain Queeg from the King Mutiny runs together 2 bearing balls. Wyndham publicly acknowledged that Decker's behavior was based on Queeg's. We got there!
Wow.
Now, I don't know if that's exactly what Sisko's doing here, but I'll keep working on that part.
Yeah. Well, I think you've drawn like a connection between those a possible point-to-point connection. If he is imitating Star Trek, who is imitating that? So I think that's still pretty cool. I think we probably beat the other podcast to that one.
Take that. Take that.
Memory, or was the mission log? Screw you. No, that's like serious deep dive for Star Trek podcast.
And now listen to me saying "we" like I'm on one of those football fans. Our team did it. We really.
Okay. Our Patreon members will forgive us for that because it's not making it into the podcast.
No. I'm saying me personally, like I did it, like I did any of the work. I'm just we cracked that one.
Yeah.
I'll say this: we ride each other's coattails better than any of the other Trek podcasts. So, yeah, I say do it.
There you go. Kira talks about she shuts off the communications to the Federation. O'Brien shuts off the communications to Bajor. They're really locking themselves down. I like how Kira says about Sisko, we'll replace him with a reasonable commander, meaning someone we can control. So that's her definition of a reasonable commander.
I love it.
Is a puppet.
Yeah.
Kira tries to sell Odo on joining them by saying, you can do martial law, you can throw Quark out an airlock, you can... Yeah. I mean, those are the things she thinks appeals to Odo. She doesn't know him. I mean, I do think Odo would not complain too much about martial law because he would like greater control sometimes. But I also don't think he'd throw Quark out an airlock.
Right. He is just a very fair-minded character typically, which I like. I mean, to a fault, but... I did think
if he had it, as much as he enjoys the interplay with Quark, I think if he was given power, he'd probably kick Quark out. And then maybe regret it. And then maybe regret it, but I think he would kick Quark out.
Interesting.
Not an airlock, but out of the station.
Well, they did have that fantasy where he had him in the brig, so maybe.
But yeah. Sisko wants to arrest Kira, but O'Brien wants to flee. I mean, and then come back to retake the station? I guess that's because they're living out the thing. So I was going to say, it doesn't really make sense for these characters in this situation, but I guess if they're living out somebody else's story, it might make more sense. Bashir thinks he's unaffected, which is kind of a fun little bit for him to play with.
Bashir
is remarkably not annoying in this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah. I was going to say, this might have been my favorite scene, or probably top 3 scenes of the episode, at least. Odo figuring out how to play along with what was going, just seeing him get just crafty enough to, okay, I need to put this in terms that these people are going to understand so I can get these things across to them. Here are their motivations. I understand this now. I'm just going to, put things, I just love the strategy involved there.
Well, and him getting Bashir to help him save the day.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. Sisko really beats up a Bajoran officer, throws him over the railing, whatever. That's my alternate episode, is there's some actual stakes in that maybe Sisko kills the officer or some member of the senior staff. At this point in the series, I'd be like, Bashir dies during this whole thing. I don't want Bashir to die. I like his stories later. I don't like his story here. But, I feel like we needed some stakes. And I think if this episode had come later, even if it's a junior officer we've never seen before and don't know their name, Sisko killing somebody in that way would have a lasting impact that I would have liked to have seen.
Yeah, I mean, I was taken aback by it, and I thought, I didn't know if it was going to break the spell for somebody or whatever, but it didn't, but it was, it was brutal.
You made me think of an alternate episode when you mentioned it, but I'm really curious about, so do you really think you would have liked out of curiosity to see just how it would play out, or would you have liked that to really be a lasting thing throughout the series?
I'm not saying that they have to keep coming back to it throughout the series, but I feel like if Sisko, for instance, maybe even not even killed, but maimed or something, this poor Bajoran officer, then at least there's something to chew on after this episode. Maybe he's a little more reserved the next time Bajoran stuff comes up.
Okay.
Not forever, but,
And then it turns out it's Tasha Yar that he did it. when they take off the mask. My alternate episode was everyone reacts like Dax. So it's essentially just a bunch of stoners in space. That's what I kept feeling like. Which I guess they've done that movie. It's called Dark Star. It's an early John Carpenter movie. It's a fun 70s stoner sci-fi movie. So I recommend. Not awesome, but much like the alternate episode I'm describing, it'd be funny. It's fun. It's funny. And I would imagine I saw it when before I ever had marijuana or anything or alcohol or anything, and I was like, well, this is still pretty fun. I would imagine if you were stoned or drunk or both, it would be a lot more entertaining.
So mine would be we actually do get to see some godlike beings come out of this, and it's going to be at the end. And then, no, this is good. So they show up, and they're just pretty much audience members, or maybe even critics, just sort of like breaking down the performance that they saw.
Okay.
Like how they're embodying the characters and going through some sort of analysis. Maybe we see a bit of a class or something. Something kind of.
And then Odo opens the airlock and the critics fall into space. When Odo opens the airlock, it kind of bothered me that only the cloud went into space. I'm not saying the opposite.
I thought so too.
He's saying everybody grab onto something secure. There was nothing that would have flown out with it. I think it was a budgetary thing. It was a budget.
Yeah, I thought they should have been like perpendicular with their legs like, I'm going to fly into space.
Not every cargo crate would be secured enough that it didn't go flying, right?
Right.
Well, he might have staged it first. I mean, they did lure him to a specific place. That's
a good point, Keith. But
or there's some other hand wavy kind of magic. You can say that it was calibrated.
So
sorry, the space around it was calibrated to only affect cloud gas or whatever it's going to be released, or there's a force field for I don't know.
I think I'm backing up a little bit now, but when Kira's all up in Dax's business, was there supposed to be sexual tension there?
That was
was this just the perfect?
Ira Stephen Burr took it as sexual tension because when he was talking about how great the episode was, he's like, and really just Kira coming on the Dax, anyone wants to see that.
Did he really say that?
Yeah.
And Dax in the whole episode is like, hey, whatever, man, remember this time? And so I think it makes sense that, she's like, okay, get in my face. I mean, they were,
My interpretation at the time, yes, is that Kira was supposed to have been cast as some sort of seductress character who was trying to overtly bend people to her will that way. So,
Keith, you may want to cover yours briefly, but I think the writers took that note because when we see Mirror Universe Kira, I'm pretty sure she's bisexual and dominant.
Well,
so
I can see that from here.
They do like 4 or 5 Mirror Universe episodes, not just one like the original series did. So we'll get to that at some point. The end, Cisco accepting Kira's apology and the fact that she even makes the apology, I really felt like they were both showing their respect for one another and they were both really being mature in the way they handled it. It was big of both of them to make that piece.
I think it goes to Keith's thing about when you get super drunk and then the next day you're like, oh man, did I say that? I'm sorry. I don't know what I was doing.
But I feel like there's so many times in the series where you'd expect Kira to not be the type that could apologize. Like, she seems so tough sometimes.
Right.
But I feel like we get these moments of her where, like, no, she's tough in emotional maturity, too, not just the physical stuff. And it's really nice to see that kind of well-rounded, mature character. I like I said, I very much took Kira for granted earlier in my watch of the series, but this time I'm really appreciating her. And then a visitor, for sure.
I thought you were going to mention my other point about the continuity. For this still ties into the underlying conflict. I mean, this sort of confirms it brings forward actual disagreements that they have and are going to have again at some point very soon. Mm-hmm. So I think that even kind of, well, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that softened her attitude for what was to come, but I think I'm giving way too much now. So,
well, I was just saying, the first officer of the Klingon ship leaves a log for them the computer to fix. Do people on Navy ships and submarines keep logs now? You think captain's logs that are like that? Are they vlogs, or are they just like, I'm just letting here's what we're up to?
I mean, they definitely used to keep logs. I assume they still do.
I guess there's some kind of log of like, here's what we're doing, da da da. I feel like I don't know that they're as personal as what we see here or whatever. But
Well, I mean, do you think, I don't know if Stephen was asking this specifically, but I mean, do you think they actually use cameras for it now? I mean, do you think they just like record themselves?
I doubt it. I bet they type it instead of handwrite it, but I doubt they record video.
Maybe for their own edification. But
It's a good in Starfleet on Star Trek. They do both the ship's log and the personal logs. I don't know I don't know if real Navy people do personal logs, or if they
I
just
imagine maybe they keep diaries or journals or whatever. But
So did they say that was non-Starfleet Klingon vessel essentially?
What do you mean by non-Starfleet?
I remember them saying something about Starfleet in relation to it. So, I mean, the Klingons are still separate from Starfleet.
Yeah, they've had a peace treaty for 75 years or whatever since Star Trek 6, essentially.
Okay. Yeah,
but they are not. Worf is still the only Klingon in Starfleet.
Okay.
Yeah, they're their own thing.
I guess
will become important later in the series, but we'll get to it.
My point in thinking of that, of course, was maybe they just have different regulations as far as the kinds of logs are supposed to keep. And
they sure would, but yeah, I think Starfleet definitely keeps personal logs, and I think these Klingons do too. So, yeah, log books are definitely a thing for the U.S. Navy. I do not finding anything when I Google about personal.
I mean,
it's classified.
Let's rank. Who was the shady character in Dramatis Persona besides everybody?
Yeah, I guess that's because that's pretty much what I had. Everybody but Dax. So I guess it's the light creatures or whatever they were.
The godlike archives.
Energy creatures.
I think they're just computer programs or something.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Kira specifically.
I am in agreement with Keith. I had Kira as well. I feel like we saw her doing a lot more shady stuff, whereas O'Brien was just up front. Hey, you're either with Cisco or you're with me. Who is your annoyance? You already know mine.
I was okay with everybody just because I thought they were being controlled or whatever. They were puppets, if you will. So, Con Teal was mine.
Con Teal?
The Klingon.
Oh, the Klingon?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Jimmy might have sold me on this. I mean, in real life, that would be a very annoying character to me.
Puppet Cisco?
Yes. We've seen characters like that. We've probably worked with some of them. And seen them as public figures, and yes, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, Keith and I are just totally in sync right now. I doubt it's going to hold up as we continue the ranking, but I like it. We'll see. I mean, I'd be thrilled if it did.
Which is why you can't be trusted.
Now
I am getting a week ahead when I'm talking about people being in lockstep, but we'll get into that next week.
Oh, you can have a drink with. Yeah.
Dax.
Of
I want to
course
hear the stories, and I liked her just like, hey man, everything's cool at that, which is not something she said, but it's just, yeah. She was amused.
I gotta go Odo because, as things are going down, he's the only one who's still sane.
That's a good one too.
That's pretty much where I was. I was between Odo and Quark. I'm not sure which on that.
I enjoyed seeing Odo take charge in the sense of he was just had it together and was handling it smartly. And lots of times he's the crabby guy. In this episode, he was not the crabby guy because, so I enjoyed that.
It's almost too bad. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Odo and Quark, Keith, which I think is an excellent point. But there was that episode where Odo and Quark were up in ops, like handling things, and I almost wish there was a repeat of that here. That Odo had to recruit Quark to help him. That would have been a good alternate episode. Yeah. Anyway, ranking the episode. God, I still want to go down, but let's start in the middle. We'll see. Babel.
Well, I guess I like it better than that. And that's just one that didn't really stick with me as well as it could have. I don't know why exactly, but I was probably distracted, but recency bias, so forth.
Ooh.
I would go down, so Steven will tie break.
Oh man,
I wish I had O'Brien's lines in front of me so I could do some quotes there.
There were some fun quotes in this one.
For fun, I'm going to go.
Need to be careful what you choose here.
I'm going to go above just for fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you two are against me. I see how it is.
You have to flee and come back.
I'm looking down, and as much as I don't like this episode, right below that is Dax, and I did not like that episode. So I'm going to stop there. I'd say right below Babel, which still puts in the middle for the season, which I don't think it deserves. But this season's been pretty bad. So anyway, going up, Above Babel is If Wishes Were Horses.
Which we just watched. I guess Babel's been a while. I guess we really didn't like that because I would go above If Wishes Were Horses too.
Yeah, I think I would as well.
Above that's The Storyteller.
I would stop there myself.
Yeah, that's a good place.
While I did say I'd go a couple lower, I agree. I see the arguments for Babel, and If Wishes Were Horses, I can see this being better, possibly, arguably. But yeah, Storyteller, it's not better than, for sure. So yeah, I think you guys picked a good spot for it.
Yay.
Next week, Duet. A Cardassian suffering from Kalanora, a disease that indicates he served in a labor camp, visits DS9. Kira is determined to convict him as a war criminal. Until then, live long!
Like the time, remember the time we podcasted about that TNG episode, Justice? That was awesome. And
you told us about that this morning, but I think it's more important to tell people to prosper by they need to flee and come back with greater numbers.
You're right.
That's the best way to prosper.
And prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?